Okay, hello, welcome to episode 14 of the Sisyphus complex solution. As I tend to have a little bit of a habit lately of forgetting something somewhere along the lines, this week I'd forgotten to even name this episode, as I have done previously. So I'll literally just spur of the moment, just before I've started doing this, I've decided to go with the bad, the good and the ugly. And there's a specific reason why I've turn that around from the good, bad and the ugly, but yes, it is basically a rip-off of that. Anyway, so we're going to continue into the process of looking into what government actually consists of, so that we can start to continue to evolve the John Hoskyns wiring diagram map, government wiring map, and get the details required in order to be able to replicate that. So the first part that I'll kick off with, if I can get my cursor back, yep, is the introduction to a couple of videos that I can recommend. The first one at the top, and that is the 20 Things COVID-19 Taught Us by Steve Dace, and that's an amusing one. It's essentially a factual but still hysterical perspective as to the utter nonsense that we've all been subject to. Obviously that's done from an American point of view and that, but we've all been subject to the same idiocy and continue to be so. So I'd definitely recommend having a look at that. It's only the short version of that particular segment. There are a couple of other funny bits after that, so you'd have to check the entire show, which is about an hour and a half long. So that's up to you. The one down the bottom is the one that's a little bit more serious, and as you know, I've mentioned the Great Reset a few times before. Still nowhere near enough people that are aware of this particular conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory, it is simply a conspiracy, and the conspirators are the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, as well as various other little tentacles. This particular version of the guide comes from James Corbett of the Corbett Report. There are a couple of elements to it that I wouldn't be 100% in agreement with. It doesn't matter. The one good bit that I managed to get from his show notes is that the link that I always include in terms of the Great Reset widget, it was always a sign-in version that I'd had the link to. Well, apparently, from what James has discovered, they've now got one where it's just widely open. I mean, these people are so blasé about their intentions that they've just got it as open to the public to go through at their leisure. So you can just click onto that and have a look and see what sort of utter crap that the World Economic Forum in particular, and that who were the main voice that launched this. And you can see what old F.O.W.E.F.U.N is looking to implement. So have a look at that, get to understand exactly what it is that a lot of the politicians are just being useful idiots and just being complicit with. Because, yeah, they're not in charge of the countries anymore. The next slide that I'll go into, and that'll, from a different perspective, will give you a little bit more of an understanding around as to how bad that is. But you know, you're going to have to check your own respective countries. So, two videos I recommend, links in the description. As per usual, all links will be in the description, so I'm not just plucking things out of my arse. You can actually have a look at stuff for yourself, okay? Right, so, going into the Sisyphus complex solution, the first thing that I wanted to do is give a little bit of an emphasis in terms of, like I say, last week I'd started with the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department, But there was one part that I left out, which obviously, and that is now going to be the introduction to this week's, where I'll be covering 3 departments, hence the title. This particular part within the BEIS annual report that is available again for everybody to look at, you've basically got a progress report quite near the front of it, and it's a progress report as to how well they're doing in complicity with the sustainability goals of the United Nations and the development goals. So, like I say, I mean, they come out with all these ridiculous terms and that, but it's sustainability development. I mean, it's all meaningless drivel. But since when does any sovereign nation give a progress report and be accountable to the United Nations? That's not their job. I mean, obviously, and that's, as anybody that's been watching all of these programs and that, you'll know from F.O.W.E.F.U.N. that I'm giving you more details as exactly who these people are at the United Nations and all of the different tentacles that are within it. And when people have turned around in the past and said, well, you know, this world governance, oh, it's you know, it doesn't exist, nobody's doing anything like that. Well, quite plainly they are, and quite plainly the governments are being complicit with a world governance program under the United Nations, and they are giving this progress report. I mean, it's we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 of the. I think there's 7. Yeah, there's 17 goals in total. And that. So they're responsible for reporting on 8 of those goals. Get the fuck out of town. How many people have heard any government at any election turning around and saying, by the way, when we get in power, we have to report to the United Nations. So basically, and that's it, we can say whatever we want, it doesn't matter because we're getting our instructions from them. And so it doesn't matter what we've got in our manifestos, they're going to be the ones that tell us what we have to do. Who knew that? I did. It's about time people actually learnt and held the government to account for this, because they do not have our permission. They do not have our consent. Just simply electing somebody and have them just go off and do whatever the hell they want, that's not the way it works. So keep those sorts of things in mind. So I want to move into the actual departments, because there's, like I say, I think there's 49 of them in total. There's a lot to get through. I'll just be doing 3 today. Right, so the first one that we're going to look at is the Competition and Markets Authority. Now, the key problem to point out with this one is, as per usual, there's very little in the way of appropriate reporting, financial accountability. The number of staff that I've managed to put into the process plan thus far has ended up having to be something of a guesstimate, because when you look through the reports and that, and you add up how many people are actually working within this, it totaled out at something like around about 95. But considering they've got a staff budget of 69 million, that doesn't work. So like I say, I've had to guesstimate a little bit and put them down as having something more along the lines of about 1,200 staff. And even then, that seems a little bit excessive, because I think the average salary then works out at something like around about 57 grand, which in these types of departments, it should never end up as that much. So, like I say, as per normal, and as has been demonstrated as I've continued to go through this, all of these rhetoric around the transparency and being open, honest, integrity, blah blah blah, they're not following their own. They're not following their own rhetoric, which never happens. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, and it certainly isn't a surprise to anybody when you know that they're also being complicit, taking instructions from an organisation that have no authority in this country. So, like I say, not a big surprise. Now, a few important things around this is the first thing to suggest again and to really emphasize is that, as I've stated on a number of different occasions, when you have these people going on saying, oh, socialism, and it's because capitalism is evil, and the reason why they're ignorant is because you cannot have a system of governance that is considered to be capitalist if you've got something like the Competition and Markets Authority. This is regulated markets. Those two things, regulated markets, free market, it's not compatible. So it's not a capitalist society. So it's another one of those examples that you can throw in the face of a socialist moron that's spouting nonsense. Now, the problem I've got with this particular type of organisation, I mean the budget that I've managed to scrabble together out of the various figures that they've got, it's not horrendous, I don't think, but it's all adding up, and I already know, by the way, it's not going to be a shock to anybody, but in terms of the calculations of the department so far and what the annual budget is supposed to be, I already know that that's not going to match up. So when you've got something like the Competition and Markets Authority, I do understand the need for something like a regulator in terms of competition and how markets behave and things of this nature. But the way that it is actually being put in place is, it's either beyond its reach, it is too influential in areas that it shouldn't be playing a role in, or, and this tends to be the biggest thing of all really, that it claims to be a regulator and an oversight body that fails dramatically in a lot of the stuff that they want to promote themselves as being. So I just wanted these on the screen here, and that at the side you've got the and there's also one underneath the budget, but all of the different responsibilities that they claim to have. So I just want to run through these quickly. So at the top you've got the protecting consumers, particularly those in vulnerable circumstances. Well, no, you bloody don't. The prime example as to why they don't go anywhere near anything like that is because I don't know what it's like in other countries. Now I do know obviously in that places like Japan, and I have seen some stuff like this in America. But within the UK especially, I do notice that for decades we've had consumer affairs programs where it is literally a couple of hosts that are telling the tales, telling the stories, telling the facts of occasions when consumers have been grossly let down, ripped off and treated poorly, etc., etc., by various companies. And quite often they will actually bring a representative of that company onto the show and say, well, look, this is what you've done. What are you going to do about it? Now, the thing about that is that if you've actually got an organisation that is protecting in the way that they're claiming to be doing so, then such a programme wouldn't need to exist, would it? Basically. I mean, I'll give you one example. There's a long-running programme called Watchdog, and near as damn it, every year for the past, well, I mean, I don't watch the BBC anymore and that, but so up until say around about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and that when I used to occasionally watch a bit of it. So a couple of years ago, and then going back about 5 or 6 years, consistently there was an organisation, the Curry's PC World. So they used to be separate organisations, but then they amalgamated. So Curry's is selling white goods, and then obviously PC World is computers and peripherals and so forth. They were on that series every year, consistently ripping off and treating their customers absolutely terribly. Never was anything ever done about it, because the same thing would happen year after year after year, and they didn't give a damn because they could just get away with it. So for this particular part of their supposed responsibilities just does not take place at all. So that's essentially a false claim. So there's a little note that I've got written down here, and that I'm looking at it now, and I'm thinking, what the bloody hell are you talking about? But anyway, also I'm not going to read my own notes. I'm talking bollocks to myself here. But anyway, let's move down to the next one then. So the improving trust in markets. A bit of an unusual bit of terminology there, because it's that's quite a wide scope, and from what they're suggesting there over fake reviews and so forth, I'm not entirely sure what that's got to do with the market per se. That's more like to do with like advertising standards and things of that nature. But anyway, they're also completely, if you did want to take it to the correct interpretation of improving the trust in markets, they're continuous failure with the pharmaceutical sector. That would be a bit of an issue, wouldn't it? And as far as government's involvement in terms of having this influence into a regulated market, it becomes a bit of a double whammy really, and that when it comes down to the pharmaceutical sector, because not only have you got these people claiming to be improving trust, and then you've got the Crown Commercial Service that claim to be advising on how to make competent contracts, and yet they always end up paying twice the standard price. It's not really showing government in any sort of competent light. And so what tends to be more of the case when it comes down to this improving trust in markets, a more accurate description would be to an increase in incompetence, laziness and increased cronyism. So that would actually be a bit more of an accurate description. In case you're not getting it yet, this is the bad. Okay. Yeah, the third one is worse. But anyway, so I seem to have missed one out in... Oh no, I haven't. Right, so tackling digital markets, I've just written it down as and cut it short for myself because they're called notes for a reason. But anyway, they've got some similarities here in terms of some of the other offices that, although I haven't really dug into as yet, it's stuff that I am aware of due to ongoing work elsewhere. And that's in regard to similarities to the Information Commissioner's Office, where they tend to be using and abusing the laws around the digital markets. And so one of the areas would be, for example, like the GDPR and this kind of thing. If you remember, I'd mentioned something about what constitutes a data controller and a data processor and things of this nature. These people tend to be very flexible in how they utilise legal definitions, that they will use it to meet their own ends whilst holding everybody else to the definition of the law. This particular area, they have not got a clue what they're doing, and I think it is an area where obviously, that, I mean, people will have seen lately, I'm assuming, about the issues that have taken place out in America with Twitter and Facebook, and banning that any link through to the Washington Post, was it maybe, around the Joe Biden and Hunter Biden story, and the fact, all of that banning going on before, yet that they will allow other completely made up dribble from all manner of sources if it's attacking somebody like Trump or anybody that's right leaning, but they will shut down any dispersal of information that says anything against their little golden boys. So that kind of issue is obviously also taking place in the UK. There's a whole range of people that are being shut down, not only on digital media, but obviously in the real world as well. And that, I mean, Darren Grimes, prime example recently, and that's being threatened with arrest for something that somebody else said on his YouTube show. Outrageous. So they clearly don't know what they're doing. But the point there is that it's clearly a need for us to be able to figure out what that regulation is going to look like. I mean, it does end up being obviously a much more complex scenario, because all too often you have these people turn around and say, well, the digital, the tech giants, there's no way that you can compete with them. There's no way that you could be able to reproduce what they've done. Well, rubbish. Absolute rubbish. Of course you can. I mean, just because I mean, like I say, since I was thrown off of LinkedIn and now I'm on Parler and Minds, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, why would people be so wedded to just something where they're 9 times out of 10 that just writing complete and utter arse dribble? I mean, there's very few people that actually put anything of any intelligence on these things. So really, does it matter that much? Is there nobody out there that has got the mental capacity to say, right, who are the guys that understand the problems that are out there, that will have much more integrity, that will be able to understand that an investment of this nature would be a worthwhile investment, and it would be particularly a worthwhile investment because we know how to get the people on our side. We will be able to provide the service that they really do want and enable them to have the freedom of speech that they require, within reason. Get rid of all the lefties. But so things of this nature, I mean, they're not doing it correctly at the moment. Am I saying that there's an immediate golden bullet that I'd be able to pluck out of my backside and go, there you go, here's the ideal replacement? No, that's what all of you are supposed to be contributing to, and that's so, well, okay, how's this going to work? And maybe with a bit of proper conversation, somebody might actually come up with that decent competitive idea. Who knows? So anyway, that's something to think about. And again, it's the bad element to this particular department. Right. So the next part, enhancing productivity and economic growth. There's a contradiction in terms, isn't it? I mean, the more involvement from government, the less productivity there is. So how the hell they think that they're enhancing anything is beyond me. I mean, that really is a ridiculous thing to say. So one particular area where I can identify that a lot of the elements around job creation and some of the barriers to job creation, I find from conversations with a wide range of different people that the regulations, in order to be able to take on a particular role, even at the entry level, So, for example, it used to be years and years ago, in that time, like in the early 80s. If you wanted an entry level job of some description, that you could walk into a shop, you could walk onto a building site, and say, have you got anything that I can do today? I mean, the building site was always the main one that the lads went to. And you used to be able to go up to the site manager and just ask that question, and they'd say yay or nay. They'd say, okay, well, we've got somebody missing today. Go and do some sweeping up or what have you, and we'll see how things go. That's how you manage to get on site. These days, you have to have what's known as an SCS card, which that costs you money. So, I mean, you're already putting a barrier, an impediment to young people to be able to get onto the job ladder and to get the experience that they need. And that follows right the way through the professions. So if you remember, I've pointed out previously in that how the project management, it's run by an institute where they just seem to sit there and take your money every year in order for you to remain qualified. And in order to be able to justify their existence, they will just make up the next load of crap for that year to say, oh, now this is what project management means. And then they're not doing themselves any favours. They're making the profession worse, not better. So another example, that is the nursing. I mean, it was always a massive mistake, as far as I'm concerned, in the first place, that the profession of nursing changed so dramatically, and I don't know exactly when it happened. I think a lot of this happened, I think, in that when I wasn't in the UK, I was out in Japan at the time, and where nursing again was one of those ones where it was predominantly a sort of on-the-job training type of scenario, and they ended up being very well versed in all elements of what it took to care for the patients. Well, these days, and to be a nurse, you have to have a degree. And what used to be the nurse is now called a health care assistant, I believe. And even at the healthcare assistant level, and that they consistently turn around, they're getting them to do something like around about 25 different online courses every year, where an awful lot of those online courses are repetitions of what they did the year before, and they've got bugger all to do with nursing. I mean, because I did actually help a healthcare assistant, something like around about 10 years ago, something like that. She didn't have time to do these courses when she was at work, and when she got home and that, she was knackered. And no, it wasn't a girlfriend or anything like that, just somebody that I knew. So I said, well, let me have a look at it and that, and I'll see if I can help you out with it. And I had a look at the types of courses that they were asking her to do, and it was a course on how to lift up boxes and things like that. I mean, it was just idiotic, absolute box-ticking bullshit. But I ended up, because she was one of these types of people that when she goes through these sorts of scenarios, that she has to read everything, write down notes, and then do the test at the end. Well, to me and that sort of stuff, and I mean, it's just plain bloody common sense. So you just skip through to the test, and there you go, it's done. But these types of things, though, it's just pointless. And understanding what kind of methods that people should be able to progress from entry level to gain the experience to become competent, and then to progress into more senior levels of responsibility. That's standard common sense. Again, it ends up being, I mean, yes, you can say it's part of a hierarchy or anything of that nature, and there's nothing wrong with people doing a degree and entering at a higher level because they'll have more knowledge, providing it is an actual proper degree and that not something like bloody film studies or some gender studies or any crap like that that's of no use to anybody. But the wider market and the wider job creation market is very dependent on being able to free people of barriers to entry. And so I think a lot of what they do is actually, as per usual, when governments get involved in this type of thing, it's an impediment to economic growth. It's an impediment to productivity. They've got it all arse about face. So I do not agree with this kind of thing. And I think industry as a whole has got to really reconsider what the hell it is that they're playing at, and putting unnecessary costs onto youngsters in particular. So if you want somebody to do a test of some description, so like years ago, and that you used to have these oh god, I can't remember what they're called now, but there was a particular type of technical qualification that I know there are that the government has been mentioning that they're looking to reintroduce something similar now, but it's guaranteed they'll fuck that one up. But it's something that you can do on the job, and then you have the conversation with the manager or the owner of the company, whichever one is whichever one you've got access to, and you can say, well, okay, then now I've managed to get to this sort of level of understanding. Is there a particular qualification you'd like me to have? And so then I've got that piece of paper in my hand that I don't have to pay for every year to say that it's mine. And that you can say, well, okay, now because I've got that particular piece of paper, this is that evidence that you might need to be able to say, well, right, now can I move on to the next level? And hopefully, justifiably, get that little bit of a pay rise. That's how you get your progression. That's how you get your incentives. That's how the kids can have some ambition, and you can increase your productivity. Do things logically, not the way these people are doing things. Right, the next one that they've got, oh god almighty, the bloody climate change again. So what the hell has climate change got to do with competition and markets? I mean, that is then once again having direct negative impact to competition and markets, because it is going to be having influence that is going to be pushing pseudoscience and idiotic supposed technologies that they think are the saviour. Going back to the bloody sunbeams out of Greta's arse scenario, and there's something that I'll be coming back to a little bit later on around that. This is an impediment to markets. This is destroying competition. There is nothing in any of this that suggests that they've got a competent measure of being able to understand cost-benefit analysis. There is nothing in there to suggest that they've got any understanding of the secondary considerations, the secondary thought processes, risk mitigation, and the damage that they will actually be doing to the markets. So that kind of nonsense, I mean, like I say, burden of proof. Simple as that, burden of proof. And then think about it. How and what does the actual market need to be doing to be able to... it's more along the lines of actually, and that it's more along having the capability to understand that, don't chuck all your fucking chemicals in the river. Things like that. Forget the climate change shit, because it's just rubbish. There's no science behind, no real science behind it. Which again then would not be a part of this particular department. That would be down to like the environmental department and holding people to account through things like that. This is not a competition and markets authority's responsibility, so that sort of rubbish, bad, can't be doing with it. Right, taking on responsibilities as leaving the EU. These people, again, it's quite clear they've got absolutely no idea what they're doing in terms of what kind of shift there should be as a result of leaving the European Union. I mean, it should be so basic and obvious. I mean, you've got your existing relationship. You have that all laid out in front of you, and you go, okay, right, now what's going to be taken out? What is actually going to change? Once that is taken out, okay, so these are regulations that had previously been part of the European Union. That's now going to be under our auspices. Is our market going to be better off left alone? Or do we have to have a little bit of oversight in order to be able to make up that removal of European authority? It's not bloody rocket science, but they still don't understand what they're doing. Anyway, I mean, who knows? They might not even bother bloody leaving in the end, and that because Boris is faffing around again. So there's only only really one area of legal compliance that should really have anything to do with this particular department. That's the Competition Act of 1998. Because that's supposed to be concentrated on ensuring that there's no cartels, of which there plainly are, but these dipshits don't seem to do anything about it. So essentially, and that then means that the main review of what this particular authority is responsible for is taking a good look as to which kind of legal basis are they supposed to be developing their accountability and responsibility. How does that then apply to the markets, and then restricting them to that specific role. So get rid of all of the guff and just stick to the competency that you're supposed to be concentrated on. That would be a very simple and cost-effective, as well as beneficial, reform to this particular authority, and then everybody would understand exactly where they stand. Hopefully competency would increase, and they would actually start to fulfill some sort of role that, like I say, would ideally justify their existence. So that's the Competition and Markets Authority in brief. Let's move on to the next one. You'll notice at the top there, and that's immediately, and that I've got cost neutral, because that is the claim that is made. And this is the HM, Her Majesty's Land Registry. Well, they do suggest that they're a non-ministerial department, but considering they're listed under BEIS, you know, I mean, they have to report to the ministerial department, so it's a bit of a pointless statement. So the first part really, and that is that I wanted to really sort of concentrate on, that is the fact that there was this cost neutral claim. So the services around property data, and you got land charges that come with this. There's a whole range of different fees that are centred around what the Land Registry is all about. Because one of the key price indexes for the UK is property pricing. It does end obviously in that. I mean, I'm not going to go down the route of whether housing is too expensive or anything like that, because that becomes a separate matter. It's in terms of understanding the scale of property, the size of properties, the whole range of information. Like I said, I mean, it all becomes a little bit more complex than I'd want to spend more time on it. A whole range of different information that they can provide both to government in order to understand what the resource level is, and then also into the markets in order that they understand more about what the supply and demand is. So it does actually present, in theory, a rational level of benefit in terms of both government and private sectors, because, like I say, people need to understand that supply and demand. People need, as much as there are issues around that, people need to understand where it is that they're able to build new properties, what that land value then would be. Keeping the register of that then can feed into a whole range of different industry sectors so that people can be planning accordingly, and so that local councils can plan accordingly. And it seems to me like this is, on the face of it, one of the areas of government that seems to at least understand what it is that it's supposed to be doing. So like I said, they're not developers. There's none of this like property agency, none of that type of stuff. It's purely about the land, what is built on the land, where can things be built, etc., etc. Volume, quality, quantity, pricing. So, kind of makes sense. So I'm going to move into another part of this. There's a number there that's written in a different colour to normal. Right, so we've got a couple of data points that I'll look at first. And the first thing that you look at, and that is they have an income. Obviously, it's a land registry. People have to pay land charges in order to register their property, which is an obligation. So it's 305.9 million. Sounds okay. Does that work out in terms of cost neutrality? Well, yes it does, because not only do they make a profit every year, generally tends to be something like around about the £24 million mark. 2018 it was 27, but in addition to that they've been having retained earnings, and that has resulted in this past annual reporting term of them presenting what has been stipulated down the bottom there as a special dividend. And that means that this particular department has actually been a net contributor. We have a good department. A net contributor of 508 million. That's going to be a one-off for the time being. But like I say, historically, they tend to be handing over money to the government. So, my God. One slight issue I would have, of course, is the the diversity and the equality and reflecting what society looks like. 60.5% female workforce. Not true. That's the workforce for females should be 47%. So they are denying work to males, which is quite a terrible thing for them to do in order to meet their own criteria and their own rhetoric. So yes, I'm not going to moan about these people. I would suggest, as with all things, is that you have to have a look and see what it is that they're really doing, because I know that within the Land Registry they're now looking towards having a whole series of technology related programs, which obviously is still being developed within the budget, and it is looking to enable faster information across the market, more detailed information, which again can only end up being a good thing on a national government level, on a local government level, to the market sector. It's how effective, how efficient, and what kind of implications that would be around those kind of technology systems. Now, when I say technology systems, predominantly what you're looking at is it's essentially going to be an online database presented in website form, basically. There'll be certain, mobile phone apps. It's nothing overly complicated, but when it comes down to government organisations putting these things together, it's not exactly got a good track record. Maybe they'll need to have a consultant employed at, what was it, for the track and trace? Was it £74,000 a day? Fucking idiots. Anyway, I would look towards having at least a review. So not necessarily a reform, because I mean, if something is working, the old expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But have a bit of a review, make sure that the plans that they've got going forward make sense, and that maintain what looks like, on the face of it, a good department. So that would pretty much be it. I mean, again, there's also the issues around, because of data production and so forth. Are there any issues around privacy? I can't see it being too much of a problem, but just like I say, just to be on the safe side, you run a review and you see how you go. So, for the first time thus far, we can say that we genuinely have a department that is seemingly doing okay, doing us a favour. I haven't got a problem with that. So, good. So let's move into the ugly. You can't run a program like this and that without just constantly going wanker, 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 wanker. It's government, of course it's going to be full of that. But anyway, so it was nice to have a good one. So here we do have the wankers. OFGEM. So let's look at their key purpose at the top there, and that highlighted in red. Their key purpose for price controls and environmental improvements, really. I thought they were supposed to be the regulator. Why are they getting involved in price controls? Simple answer to that, really. Because of their idiocy going down this environmental road, they have been responsible, due to government instruction, for massive increases in energy bills, energy costs, to the extent that there is now a term becoming quite well known, especially around Europe, called energy poverty. And so their answer to that has been put a price cap for certain individuals. So there's a piece of information off to the side there that said that the price cap is going to go down again this winter. So it's going to go down to £1,042 as an annual figure that somebody will pay. It's not quite how it works. It's very limited as to who actually has access to that cap, and when a lot of people do actually look around in the marketplace, and that, generally speaking, you can find cheaper rates. So it makes the price cap utterly pointless. But then again, I think that was probably the intention. So it's kind of like appeasing the environmental socialist lunatics by saying, oh look, we put a price cap on something, and then do it in such a way that, as much as it does influence the market in a negative way, it's not as destructive as price controls usually are, and basically fucking about with the price index and that supply and demand calculation. I've finished my sentence there. Right. As a regulator, as far as, well, so no, not true. As the market itself is concerned, you should really be looking at this in terms of a three-pronged structure, where you've got the government policy, which is currently the general problem that is making OFGEM ugly. Because I mean, I have had conversations with people that work in this kind of area, and that's over a number of years now. And could they potentially be competent? Yeah, possibly. But then they're never really given the chance, because, like I say, the government interferes with the market too much and then shifts responsibility over to OFGEM, which means that they end up being very skewed. And between the government policies, the confused nature of what OFGEM is, and then with the market themselves, they've then subsequently developed such a complicated, nonsensical, all over the bloody place system that is, I mean, very, very, very largely not only just regulated, but with horrendous price burdens from various taxes. I mean, things like this bloody the carbon tax and all this sort of stuff, which is just an absolute farce. They've essentially they've started flying down the road of really not understanding and destroying the energy sector. Obviously, and then it's costing us over 100 million in the God, I'm forgetting my bloody words again. But anyway, yeah, it's costing us that much bloody money. So anyway, as things stand, we have had a few indications as to how they are going to be increasingly interfering and messing up the energy sector across the UK. But the path that they're taking with all of this climate change bollocks and shifting everything over to fairy farts and Greta's arse sunbeams, we have real world examples as to what we can actually expect from all of this. There is a report that I haven't got. I'm not going to be putting a link in that. You can look it up yourself. I mean, there are several examples, and it's just up to you whether you want to how deep down the hole that you want to go with it. But if you look at the markets in Ontario that went into absolute spiral because of following this sort of stupidity, have a look at what's been happening in California and the blackouts, and that Governor Newsom, I think it is, where it's been turning around and telling people in searing heat to turn off their air conditioners, and all this sort of lunacy, because they don't. Not only are they driving up the price of energy, but they're reducing the capacity, and it's just an economic disaster. And the one thing that does happen when you mess with energy, you end up having huge implications across the board. Doesn't matter what sector you're in, doesn't matter if you just sat at home and not doing bugger all day. If you haven't got any energy, you ain't going to be doing much, because you ain't going to be watching your telly. If you haven't got any energy, you ain't going to be doing much cooking. You will. I mean, the way these people seem to want to go forward, and that it seems to me they won't be happy unless everybody's living in a bloody mud hut again and cooking with cow dung. I mean, it's just, it's a very long march towards disaster. And I do have something that I will show you, and that will be worth a read, but we'll get to that in a minute. So the links with Europe and why Europe matters. Well, again, it's the total failure on government, and it's also a failure in having allowed the energy sector to be so mixed in terms of not only in terms of ownership, but for example, I think I might have mentioned this once before, we've got a biomass plant just down the road here. It's close to Sandwich, I think it is, and it's got a pipeline which takes all of, we've paid for this plant to be produced, and it's got a pipeline that goes out to Belgium, I think it goes to Belgium, and all that energy goes over to there, and they don't pay for it. They charge the customers for using the energy for what it's worth, because I mean it's not that big a place. But so we're paying for it here, and then they're using the energy out in Europe, and the customers are paying the supplier in Europe, not here. I mean, it's the total lack of competency from these people is within the whole energy market is just staggering. And so, as much as I can understand the need for a regulator, I can understand the need for maintaining energy markets on a domestic level. So that doesn't necessarily mean owned by government. It can mean privately owned, but by national companies. In so much as that, so if it's a UK company, then they can operate the particular energy source, so that you're not going to end up with these complications as to, if you do end up having a bit of a row with somebody else and that, you haven't got this fight, this intergovernmental fight over something that they shouldn't have been involved with in the first bloody place. I think there's also going to be something around OFGEM where, because within OFGEM and that, and part of the regulations is having to pay an awful lot of attention to the national grid. And the national grid is also another one of these ones that's just all over the place, and that being pushed with all of this lunatic climate nonsense. And 5 years ago they were saying, the light, if we don't do something, all the lights are going to go out, and then all of a sudden they're saying, oh no, everything's fine, we can have electric cars going all over the place, we can have all this electric this and electric that and electric the other. Oh, not a problem at all. It's like, you don't remember. I remember a couple of years ago what you were saying. How come you've suddenly forgotten it? It's a part of this scenario that we're ending up with across the board, of everybody forgetting what they knew yesterday. And so the levels of competency have dropped dramatically. So when it comes down to things like the national grid, I think what we are going to be looking towards determining as we go forward is more microgrids, so that the national grid ends up then being more of a backup, and the national grid should not be getting involved in all of these fairy farts and everything, all those sorts of rubbish, expensive, bloody scenarios. And then we also have to then look quite severely in terms of what the subsidies are, what the taxes are, get rid of this carbon tax nonsense, all this sort of stuff. I mean, there's got to be a real root and branch investigation of what the energy sector is, because it is really going to be a massive problem if they continue down this road of just sheer stubbornness and stupidity that is all based off of absolute pseudoscience. It's all part of your Great Reset bullshit plan. And we don't need it. We don't need it. We need somebody to be going in there and really grabbing this stuff by the balls and understanding what's going on, so that consumers can then understand what their bill actually, what is actually on their bill. I mean, I dare the vast majority of people to tell me that they really understand anything that is written on the bill that they get. They'll just look at the number at the bottom and go, okay, I've got to pay that much. What all the rest of that means, ain't got a bloody clue. There's very few people that actually understand what is written on your energy bills. And there's no need for it. They've intentionally made it as complicated as they can to try to confuse people, to be able to push through a whole load of crap. And that needs to be hugely simplified. And the regulation that is required there is ensuring that you have national security for energy supply for your domestic population. Stop handing all this shit over to any Tom, Dick and Harry that wants to walk through the door. So, OFGEM, hugely ugly department. So, this particular part I want to point out. The little graphics on the side there, and that just poking a bit of fun. Justifiably so. I've got a link in the description to this latest study that has come out. And there's just, I mean, I'm not going to read through it or anything. That you take your own time over this. I mean, I've looked at a whole range of studies, particularly over the last, well, predominantly over the last 5 years, and there's bits and pieces prior to that, but very much so over the last 5 years. And because of that, I'm very familiar with the work of the Connollys in particular, and Willie Soon. Now, obviously, the name Willie Soon immediately has all of the climatards screaming and shouting that they don't think he's a scientist, but he's not the right kind of scientist. In other words, that basically means he's competent. This is probably the most far-reaching, complex, well-researched, well-cited report of recent times that looks at the entirety of the energy sector and how the current plans are so loaded with failure in terms of the expectations of the capacity from renewables, which is just mathematically not possible. Doesn't matter. I mean, I know they'll keep on pushing it and they'll keep on saying it. Oh, it's going to energy is going to be plentiful. It'll provide energy for it. It won't. It's mathematically not possible. And it will not reduce CO2, which it shouldn't anyway, because again, the whole CO2 case is pseudoscience. If you can give me the scientific method, I might bother listening to you. If you can't, I'm not fucking interested in listening to yet more bullshit. This is a proper study. Have a good look at it. Try to understand some of the real failures of what you can expect if people continue to go down this road. Okay, so there's a whole series of different reports and that I could provide references to. And I think I said citation, didn't I? And it's not the most cited. It's got the most references. That's a really comprehensive list of references, so that it can be checked and rechecked, and any sort of academic of any value or worth that actually knows what they're talking about, if they were to run through this particular study and start making any claims whatsoever to say that it has not been put together or it's got any failings, they are seriously going to be putting their neck on the line. I would imagine the vast majority of the climatard ones pretending to be scientists, they would run a mile from something like this. Because those sorts of people, and that's the likes of your Michael Manns and what have you, Mr. Hide the Decline. Whenever he's asked to produce something along these lines, all you'll ever get out of him, and that is, oh, the dog ate me homework. He can't produce a damn thing because he's a fucking fake and he's a retard. Learn where the real reports come from. Learn how the data is collated, and understand that the energy market, which is an absolutely critical market, whether you're talking about progressing in if you're talking about progressing the societies in developed nations, or whether you're talking about progressing the developing nations to become more self-sufficient, it's got to make economic sense. It's got to make capacity sense. If you then look towards all this crap that they're coming out with in terms of this great reset and you're in sustainable development and all this sort of bollocks, do the same thing. Put the two side by side. I mean, get you Green New Deal. Put them side by side and see which one actually makes sense. And I guarantee all of your rhetoric side and all of your pseudoscience side, all of your Michael Manns and Al Gores and David Poxy eugenics freak Attenboroughs, all of that stuff will end up being a massive pile of arse dribble. Any report that they put out and that you're able to go through it bit by bit and pull it to pieces, literally within the space of a couple of days. Let's see if they can do the same to this. I bet they bloody can't. So that's an important part to follow on from what OFGEM should actually be doing, because if governments are not prepared to do it, then the people that are in a department that I can understand having value but are being pushed in such a way as to be going against the very principle of what they should be doing, they should push back. They should turn around and say, no, we're not going to be including all of this postmodernist crap. This is what we need to make sure that as the regulator and that the nation is going to have a consistent and cost-effective energy supply. So we're going to go with the truth and just get rid of all of the rubbish. I suppose, as David Cameron said not long after he got into office, get rid of the green crap, because it really is. So that was an important part to produce a little bit of information to go with the ugly department, so it doesn't have to end on such a negative note. Right, so here's the state of play at the moment in terms of the budgets that I can identify as best I can from those three departments, and because of the one good guy that we've come across so far, Her Majesty's Land Registry, we're still in a net positive position. The reason why we're in a net positive position at the moment is because that is purely based on those three departments. If you look down further, you'll see that the subtotal of BEIS means that the amount of money that's had been stipulated as the total across all of the departments that they oversee, and then minus the 3.1 billion for their core department, and then the 10 billion for the others. So that means that as things stand, that figure has to reflect this net positive purely because of the Land Registry. Okay, so the Land Registry was 508 million. So then you take off the competition markets, take off the OFGEM. That's the figure that we're left with at the moment. If this figure ends up at the end as costing the taxpayer the 10.3 billion, then we know that that total figure does comply with what the department had reported it as being. I'm not expecting that to be the case, but those are the calculations I'll have to look at making adjustment to towards the end. But just for the time being, I want to do the running total on the basis of the departments that I'm identifying, external from the reported figure from the core body. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So, the policy developments with the ever diminishing size of font. So essentially, for reform and review, I've added CMA and OFGEM down near the bottom there, third from the bottom. And then just to simply give that review of HMLR, because like I said, I'll just look specifically to look in their future developments around the technology, but not go through the door and, you know, don't fix what ain't broke. That's not really the expression, I don't think, but no, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So just go in, have a check, make sure everything's okay, and hopefully have them continue to be a net positive contributor. So, no additions to the cumulative taxpayer savings, though I would expect that to take place once the review and reform has taken place from the breakdown in the RASIC. Anybody that doesn't understand what a RASIC is, you'll have to go back through the episodes and understand how I actually put this into a proper plan. Like I said, one of these days I will show how that is progressing, but it's not necessary right now. Okay, so I think then that means that we can, yes we can. I'll have a puff of my phone.
Fuck off! Who do you think you are, you cheeky fucking twat?
Good. I think that we can, I really think that we need to start a campaign now called F.O.W.E.F.U.N. Like I say, now that's the UK, specifically for the UK and that, but I mean use it in any country that you want. But for the UK and that, as part of a campaign that now we're going to be leaving, now that we're out of Europe, set the new campaign to say fuck off to the United Nations and World Economic Forum, or the other way around. But yeah, hashtag F.O.W.E.F.U.N, spread it. So let's have a look at this week's communist. Because yet again, here we go, United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Industrial development. What the hell does the United Nations know about industrial development? And what the hell is any nation in their right mind enabling yet another commie? So yeah, there is written in, it's highlighted in red. Vice Minister of Finance at the fucking Chinese Communist Party. I just don't understand the logic of people to be getting involved with this and to be taking instructions from these people. I mean, you will notice when you, if you do bother to have a look through their website and understand the rubbish that they're involved with, you'll see an awful lot of their photographs and that. It's the as per usual, the marketing technique of, oh, we're doing all of these things and that to be really good people. We've got photographs of poor black people. We've got photographs of poor Arab people. You know, oh, the downtrodden, and we're gonna help them develop their industry. Really? I mean, I've got the things that they claim that they're concentrating on. I mean, youth and entrepreneurship. What the fuck has that got to do with industrial development? Gender. What the fuck has that got to do with industrial bloody development? I mean, it's absolute lunacy. Fucking gender, for Christ's sake. Now, the other part to this is, when you do pay attention to that, basically the poverty porn side that they like to push. When you've got a commie like this, inside the World Economic Forum, it begs a question in terms of what is it that China is actually doing? Or what would China actually want somebody like this to be doing in those nations? Well, we do have the answer to that, because first and foremost, going back to the 1960s, I think it was, the World Economic Forum, in conjunction with organisations like the World Wildlife Fund, have been utilising what is known as a debt trap across developing nations, and the United Nations specifically would use these debt traps in order to be able to take land away from the developing nations, because they would give them a loan with impossible terms, so that when they couldn't make any repayments, they said, oh, it's all right, you give us this particular plot of land and we're going to make that into a conservation park. Of course you fucking are. It's basically that. It's a land grab and it's a resource grab. So what you've had, old commie boys turn up and go, right, what is it the World Economic, what is it the United Nations are doing? I'm sure the World Economic Forum as well. But what are the United Nations doing? What are the programs they're running? How are they managing to be this sneaky? Little fuckwit here turns up, goes, right, okay, this is how they're doing it. And how do you think you end up with the ideas that came about to develop debt trap programs as part of the Belt and Road Initiative? Where do you think they got their ideas from? You got twats like this. So when you've got your governments and that, and sending out their reports, you know, oh, we're being good little boys and we're following your sustainability development goals, and at the same time handing over land and control across, like particularly the nation of Africa, to a bunch of arseholes like this. And then people wonder why South Africa is communist. I mean, for Christ's sake. It's just farcical. And I really am disliking more and more the fact that, whether it be the United Nations or the World Economic Forum, the theft of Industry 4.0. Because, like, I mean, Adolf Schwab turned around and go, oh, it's the fourth industrial revolution. No, it isn't, you fucking idiot. It's not a revolution, it's an evolution. It takes time. Most of the technology that you all seem to think that you've now got in place and you're ready for your takeover of the world, and we're going to track everything that anybody does and that, and shut anybody down we don't like. Most of that technology that you're relying on doesn't bloody exist. And it doesn't do the job that you think it can, because that's not what it's intended for. The vast majority of that is intended to be able to provide data to manufacturing, so that they can increase their efficiency. It's got fuck all to do with all of the crap that you lot seem to be attacking it with. I mean, talk about bloody overblown sense of proportion. And they've just, like I said, they've just stolen this term that was originated from the Fraunhofer Institute. If I was them, I'd be suing these bastards. Anyway, so yeah, like I say, yet another communist in the United Nations. And so, you know, when you fail to understand why it is that media and governments are so reluctant to throw any criticism at China, this is why. It's because basically they are taking orders from China already. I mean, it's just farcical, absolutely farcical that people don't understand this, and they don't understand the number of tentacles where people like this are in charge of it. I mean, Christ almighty, get a clue. Seriously, get a clue. And have your nation stop handing over money to... I mean, this is another one of these ones, and that where, you know, because they're so honest and full of integrity and want to help everybody with this, that and the other and that, where's your budget, you pricks? Where is your budget? How much contribution are you getting, and from what nation? Where's the information? You want to start writing to your MPs and that, saying, get out of this now. First and foremost, freedom of information. What are you doing with every single department? Bombard your government with freedom of information requests. How much are you giving to every single tentacle? Go onto the United Nations website, list the entire number of all of the tentacles, and then send out that freedom of information saying, I want to know how much you're giving to every single one of these and what it is that you think you're doing with them. Because that's taking your money and handing it over to these people for them to dictate to you. It's all wrong. So let's move into the Wanker Economic Forum. And this week I've gone with Air Liquide. Air Liquide, because they're French. A world leader in gases, technologies and services for industry and health. Right. Now, so part of the World Economic Forum that are telling you, you know, we're going to be helping the environment, we're the champions of everything that's going to be beautiful and wonderful in our one world governance, and you can trust us, we're the best at everything, we know what's better for you. These ones clearly don't, because they've got their own little violation tracker page and how many violations that they are responsible for. And there is a little bit of something to this and that. There's going to be 2 slides in this one to let you know how this crap actually works. Because as much as you can see at the top there and that, you've got the environmentally related offences, safety related offences, employment related offences. Oh, they're good then, aren't they? The amount of the fines, not that hefty. So I thought I'll just bring out a couple of the fines. But like I say, I mean, on the side that you get your summary and then a little bit more detail. So, you know, total of 95 offences. So I mean, how many times do you offend before you actually think, you're probably not really somebody to be telling anybody else what to do, are you? So a couple of the higher fines that they've been in receipt of. So we got that one from 2016, the $7 million fine. Now a $7 million fine. 3 people died of asphyxiation, and it was a $7 million fine. Dealing with hazardous materials, etc. Doesn't seem quite proportionate, does it? So go down to the next one. 4.5 million. Yet more environment related offences. Releasing ozone depleting gases. Well, is that actually a genuine issue, or is that a pseudoscience issue? Open to debate. But the thing about it is, though, is that if these are going to be the people that are pushing this very type of agenda, then essentially that's you being hoisted by your own petard, as the expression goes. So, you know, don't be telling everybody that you're wonderful and that you're there to save the world and everything is going to be sunbeams, rainbows and smiles all across the world, when you're the fuckwits that are going out destroying the environment, killing people, and generally just being absolute shitheads. Generally tends to be a good tip for most people, that when you've got a record, like if somebody comes up to you and says that they're an absolutely amazingly wonderful person, and then you pull out their rap sheet. I don't know what that's actually called. That's an Americanism, isn't it? Rap sheet. Anyway, you get the list of all the offences that they've committed, and they're all, you know, throughout their entire history on a continual. You tend to think, yeah, you're probably not that nice a person, are you? You probably want to be somebody to be avoided. So, do we want to be lectured to by continual offenders? I wouldn't have thought so. But let's have a look and see how this actually works, because keep in mind that top figure of total fines. So penalties that they've got since 2000 equate to let's just say $14.5 million. Okay. Now, how does this work in reality? Well, let's have a look at how much money they make. Because within one of the articles around, I mean, what I've got down the bottom are news announcements of project funding. So that's going to be relevant in terms of looking at the top numbers, because within the articles themselves, it goes on and mentions how that they've got reported revenues in 2019 of 22 billion. Now, just reporting revenues doesn't really mean anything. So, hence, I've got up the ticker and found out that they've got a net profit of 2.5 billion, which is around. So these are dollars, and that's so if you want to put that into euros, it's 2.14 billion euros. Well, that's a pretty hefty sum, isn't it? There's a fair bit of retained earnings that you could have there. If you've got your retained earnings, obviously that you pay out a dividend, but you keep some retained earnings, and what you do with retained earnings is research and development and project funding. But the way this works, and remember that previous figure of around about $14.5 million in fines, they are part of a group. I mean, I've put the names of the other companies that are involved in it as well, and you won't be surprised to see the types of organisations that are involved in this. So you've got the Portos project, where they're going to be getting 102 million euros in support. Now, when you say support in these projects, that doesn't mean loan. And more often than not in these types of projects, you end up with a scenario whereby that's roughly around about, they tend to do something like around about a 50-50 split. So if the project total would have been 204 million, then through government programs and grants and so forth, they will pay half of that cost out of your taxpayers' money. So 102 million from the Portos project. Then you've got the Antwerp Sea Innovative CO2 reduction, blah 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 blah. And there's another 9 million euros. Then you've got the one down the bottom, the hydrogen one. Now, for reasons I can't explain right now because I'd forgotten, I haven't put the amount in. Is it not written down on there? No, it's not written down on there. Bollocks. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. I think that one worked out at something like around about. Oh, I'm going to contradict myself. I'm going to say something wrong here. I know I am. The link is in the description. Get the number. But the way that this works is, for an organisation to continuously cause environmental damage, to be done for employment poor practices, for killing people, etc., etc., it comes to them at a cost of $14.5 million. And then they're getting, I would say roughly, once you put all of the projects together, something like around about 3 times that back from the taxpayers in Europe, who are just via the government or via the European Union handing this money over to them because it's a societal benefit. You tend not to be particularly fussed about being fined for anything if you can just turn around and go, oh, all right, then we'll just do another project somewhere else and that'll give me the money, and that'll make up for any fine which has ended up being less. So when you're wondering how the incentive works for this new form of socialism, this is how they're achieving it. whilst you're going through all of this Great Reset COVID bullshit, where they're literally intentionally destroying the competition and destroying the smaller business, these people will be completely untouched at the end of it, because the agreement they've got with the governments is that they will be handed over money. They will be in receipt of the taxpayer money through these types of programs. It doesn't matter how much they fuck up, doesn't matter what they do wrong, it doesn't matter who they kill. They won't be punished on any genuine level. They'll just simply be handed back the money. It's just sort of like, well, you know, for public perception, let's put this little fine on them. But there you go. Once you've paid that fine, here's this project, and there you go. Here's this money. Off you go. There is going to be a backfire on that, should this particular method of lunacy progress in the way that they think it's going to. If you remember back to one of my first episodes where I'd, in the introduction, in the intro sequence, I'd had the picture and the expression, the well-known expression from Margaret Thatcher that socialism is great until you run out of other people's money. This system will do exactly what all socialist systems do, and it will result in running out of other people's money. Because when you start to destroy competition in order to develop this crony system, the governments in particular will start to run out of money. Because this type of crony system, it's not in any way, shape or form going to be creating the level of market sector required to keep the society flourishing and progressing and keeping people's standards of living at any rational level. It will start to come across what's known as the law of diminishing returns. And once you enter into the law of diminishing returns in a socialist system, you have to remember that government comes first. Government starts to expand. And these people that think that they're onto a good one, and that, oh, you know, we're never going to fail because they keep giving us this money. We can do whatever the hell we like. We're going to rule the world. No, you're not. Because that government will then expand, and then they will start to take over the assets, and they will start to take over these organisations, and you essentially just end up in the standard stepping stone scenario: socialism, communism. So the people that are in these organisations that think that they're being absolute geniuses in putting all of this together and being a part of it, they have not the first clue as to how all this stuff really plays out in reality. They obviously have no idea about history. I'm sure that you've got an awful lot of pretend intelligent people that turn up to all these meetings and that will put out the latest dossier of 700 pages that nobody ever reads because it's full of crap. And they'll say, oh, well, you know, I've produced this report and I've come to this conclusion, and it's, you know, the fairy fart scenario. And you'll have all of these morons that can't be asked to actually think for a living. They'll just sit back and go, oh yeah, that's great. Because they don't have the ability anymore to understand secondary considerations. Or they just don't care, one or the other. Presumably they just think, well, you know, as long as it all lasts during my own lifetime, why would I give a shit about the future generations? That's their problem. That would probably be one of the key problems with this. And then, of course, as I've previously explained before, and that when I was doing oh crikey, I forget the name of the company now. But when I was explaining that the people that are responsible for going along with all of this crap, they don't actually own the company. It's mainly owned by pensioners and stuff like that really don't know all of the real details as to how this system is actually working at the moment, or not working. So I thought that one would be a good one to give the kind of example as to how this system works, and not a lot of this is going to become very relevant as I'm moving forward in BEIS, because within this department there's a great many of this exact type of program. So if you remember when I was talking about them previously and that, I said, well, you know, they claim to be providing assistance to small businesses, you know, the SMEs. No, they don't. I'm not too sure. I'll have a look through some of the data that I've had from previous occasions and that, but I do have some data over monies awarded via one of these particular schemes over the past. It was over a 10-year period. I think it was something like 2005 to 2015, something like that, and be able to demonstrate the number of different large organisations that are in receipt of all this money, not SMEs. And that's the game that these people play. This is the game that the socialist people play. They will tell you exactly all of the fluffy language that they think is going to make you. I'm going to move into my promotion screen. Fuck it, why not? They will push all of the language that they think is going to be fluffy enough to make you be convinced that they are the trustworthy, the saviours and everything like that, and what they're saying compared to what they're actually doing, completely the opposite. But you don't know these things until you actually bother to dig into it. And like I say, the one good thing about running through this process, you get to identify all these different types of problems, and hopefully we start to develop a governmental system that does make sense, that does do the John Hoskyns wiring diagram proud, you know, because I don't know what the end result is going to be, what I'm going to actually make it look like. I would imagine it's going to be looking quite a lot different to what the original was, but as long as the same principles are there, and that it does actually have a reasonable vision of the future, and that's something that everybody can actually play a responsible role in without being some sort of bloody collective, yet another version of socialist arseholes, you know. You know, governance is required to a degree. This is why you will never end up with a pure capitalist system. But we need to figure out what it is that's taking place within the existing systems that are genuinely not working correctly. And hopefully in that running through this process bit by bit, I know it probably ends up being quite boring for a lot of people, but if you can just take even slight snippets of it, or if you think that you've got an interest in a very specific department only, so if you think that you're limited in terms of your speciality, I think, well, right, okay, I would only really want to concentrate on say the health sector. You know, I've got some experience in the NHS, and I think I know what could be done to make some reforms there. I've got experience and qualifications, the appropriate ones, not the entry-level ones that you don't need, in the legal system. So, you know, how would we break down what laws are in place now and that? Because I mean, you're talking voluminous. It's humongous levels of legislation that would need to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb. What is it that we need to do? Concentrate on just that, if that's what you're comfortable with. fags do go out quick. But anyway, it's like I say, it's a long process in the way that I'm doing it, just simply because it's not something that I dedicate myself to entirely. I have other things to do, hence the company page here. But yeah, see what you think with things. Like I said, don't be afraid to say your own ideas. What level of government you want to see? Do you want to see the integration between business and government to the extent that we're going to be demonstrating running through this particular department? Where is the benefit? Where are the failures? What levels of regulation are actually beneficial? So, you know, there's plenty to think about. Hopefully plenty of information for you to look through yourself and yeah, understand things to your own requirements, to your own nation. You know, like I say, it's not Paulism. It's about what would be best for everyone. Okay, so I think I've probably gone on for, yeah, I have. I've gone on for bloody ages, but never mind. So that was the bad, the good, and the ugly. Hopefully there was something of interest for you in there, and I will come back with the next installation next week. Okay, cheers. Bye bye.